if I have some artwork like this where I have a container and then a graphic inside of it that I want to mill down the background, there's a number of options, but I'm gonna talk about one specifically today as a way to create a really nice, interesting background. So, just as introduction, one of the typical options I might do is to do some type of a fill on that. And so I start off with just a 2D fill. I've got a 1/4 inch end mill with an 1/8 inch fine tool, and I click apply. So that's a real kind of the most common way probably to create some artwork there. If I simulate this, you can see that I get a nice background. This is a really nice way to do this in the most simple way and get a nice result. And so one of the things that I might want to do is might want to make the edge of this look a little bit more refined as a way to maybe avoid chipping and splintering if I'm doing solid wood or something like that. And so I can come in and add a 3D clean pass. So if I clear this out, I can get in here, and I've got one defined with a 3D clean pass. So in this case, a 90-degree conic tool that I have defined as a taper tool. And I click apply. I use that same tool as a fine tool, and I can get quite a nice result there. This is really quite a common thing for me to do on things that I make, is to have that 3D clean pass to give a nice refined look to it, and a real common, simple, easy way to get great results. And so that's something you might want to do. The other issue that some people have run into is the idea that the background with an end mill tool, the background can have some tooling marks, and if you're working with dense material where those tooling marks are real apparent, maybe that becomes an issue, and there's some things you can do to help avoid that. But sometimes with a rotating tool like that, you're just going to get some tooling marks. And so one approach to that is to make the background not perfectly flat on purpose, so that you sort of remove that as an issue. And so there's a number of ways you can do that. You can add some noise to the tool paths, and that's something in another video that I discussed. But another option is to use rapid texture as the ability to fill that background. So let's look at that as a possibility and what the approach is that I might typically use. So in this case, if I just select the container hole, and I'm going to group that. If I get into rapid texture and I select that and I click apply, you see that I get nice texture that's applied to the background, and that's great. The issue here is that along the edges I'm not going to get a real smooth edge, and so that obviously would be an issue. So what do I need to do to get a nice smooth edge? And I can use that whole 3D clean pass concept as a way to give me a nice result. And so let's look at a little drawing that I did here to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. So if this is my 3D clean pass, looking at it sort of in cross section, then based on the depth that I go, I'm going to offset a certain amount from the artwork to get to this sort of leading edge of the engrave, and that's where I would want to offset my rapid texture to. So the question is, should I go exactly to that point? If I do, and if my rapid texture gets down to the depth of my engrave, you can see that I have the opportunity for the tool to bite into that slope. And so what I want to do is I want to move that tool out just a little bit, and also maybe up just a little bit, so that I avoid the tool biting into that edge. And because the tool cuts in both directions, I can get a nice sort of definition line there that defines that. And so figuring out how much this offset is kind of a critical thing. If I'm using a 90-degree conic tool that has a 45-degree angle on each side, one of the nice things is that offset is equal to the depth. So if I go down 0.2, I would offset 0.2 to get to this point. Then if I go just a little bit further than that, I can offset the tool away from there a little bit and make sure I don't bite into the edge and get the results I'm looking for. If I use something like a 60-degree conic, which has a 30-degree angle, then there's a little bit of a calculation that's required in order to calculate what that offset is, and we can talk about that also. But let's use a 45-degree conic. It's simple, easy to visualize, that sort of thing, and we can offset it and see the results we get. So let's say I'm going to go down 2/10 of an inch, and so I would want to offset from these contours a little bit more than 2/10 of an inch. And in my case, I'm going to go 0.23. So I'm going to offset to the inside of my artwork 0.23. And so if I click apply, so that's the boundary of where the rapid texture wants to go in order to not conflict with a 3D engrave that's going to serve as my clean pass. So if I select this artwork, get into engrave, select my 90-degree conic, define my depth at 0.2, make sure that the 3D engrave is turned on, and click OK. So you can see that the toolpath gets created just inside of that offset line, which is what I intended, remember, because I want the rapid texture to be just inside of that 3D engrave toolpath. And if I look at it in this view, you can see that it goes down to that depth at that 45-degree angle. So it's doing what I intended. So now when I create the rapid texture, I'll just select my offset as the boundary for my rapid texture, and then create the rapid texture using that same set of parameters that I defined. So now I've got rapid texture that is inside of that 0.2 offset, and so that should work well for positioning it. Now when I select it, I want to make sure I get all of them, and I'm going to group those together. And now what I want to do is I want to move those down into position so that they're at the depth approximately that I want. And I want to go just a little bit less than that 0.2 depth, so I can bump them up and down and get them positioned about where I want them. And now it's just a matter of adding the engrave to it. So I can come in here and I'm going to clear that out. I'm going to go back to my ball end tool, and it's an 1/8 inch ball end tool, and I want to tell it that I want to follow contour. I click OK. Now one of the keys here that I typically do is I'm going to hit Control G again to group all of those toolpaths together. If I need to delete the toolpaths or delete the object as I'm experimenting with this, it makes it easier to select them if they're grouped together. So after I toolpath, I need to group them so that they stay together. Okay, so now I've got my engrave, I've got my texturing, and so let's simulate it and see what it looks like. So now it's done the 3D engrave. Now it's doing the texture. Goes in and cleans it up, and what you see is that I get that nice edge where the tool leaves kind of a defined edge at the bottom, and the texture comes right up to it, but it doesn't bite into my slope, and so I get essentially just the results that I'm looking for. And the simulation does quite a nice job of showing me the results that I'm going to get. And so I can choose to play around with the texture a little bit, and maybe I want the look to be a little more dramatic or a little more something in order to get the results. But you can see that offset is what allows me to use a 3D engrave and to get results that really look complete and don't require any touch-up or anything like that. And it really removes the need to feel like that background needs to be perfectly flat and no tooling marks and all that sort of thing. And with something that doesn't really take longer to cut out particularly, I've added value, I've added interest to my design, and so that's using rapid texture to give me some nice results. Let's look at it one more time here, and then you can go give it a try. Okay, well, thank you very much.